If everything is okay, we should be live right now. So I'm popping up the chat for me that I can see if someone is here. Vestiel is here already. Hello, welcome. So we are going to talk about Beethoven a little bit. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I was really happy to see the reaction you all had. This video is by far my most popular upload. It will have reached 6,000 views in Monday, I think, in 1 week, and then the Wednesday video was interesting, I believe, as well as too. So Jason, hello. Adam, great to have you. Cinemot 621 and Joseph. So what we will do today is I will give just a brief summary of what those videos were about. And then I'll take your questions in the chat. I have prepared also a Google Docs where I copied your comments, or some of your comments, because there were really a lot. So going through them. We did last week the first live stream this way, and I wanted to repeat that and try out for a few weeks how this works. It enables me to go a little bit more in detail on certain aspects that you ask me, and you'll understand if a video has over 100 comments in one day. I'm really happy to read all of those, and I really try to do that, but some questions are very not complicated to answer but need some background, and sometimes just by doing a live stream talking about it, it all makes sense to combine things, compress things a little bit to, funnily enough, speed things up a little bit. Blake Simpson is here. Good morning there. Here it's in the early evening. David, welcome to you all. So on Monday I have recorded that Beethoven Symphony, which was something that was unplanned. I was trying actually just that symphony on my Erard piano for reasons to play it on the pianoforte when it comes, but I couldn't wait for the pianoforte. I mean, I was so impressed with the result that I couldn't wait to share that with you. So I did, and of course, when I've recorded that, there was no other way than to make a Wednesday video talking about the notation and things that are interesting and important to know. We talk a lot about metronome numbers, but if you follow the channel a little bit longer and still remember those live streams I had, oh, that's over a year ago, I think, practicing with you together the inventions of Bach. By the way, I should record them. They are not recorded yet, and they were actually ready. Would be a nice project, recording project as well. Oh, by the way, talking about recordings, I have to show you something in a minute. Yeah, the pianoforte will come soon. It did sound last week, was one string, so next week we'll visit that. It'll come in June, July, but it's really going to its end, and it will come here to test. Probably we'll have to go back to the workshop to fine-tune this complicated machine compared to a clavichord. It is. And okay, Joseph, thank you. Well, yeah. Well, you writes, I didn't have a chance to comment, but I loved your performance of Beethoven's Fifth. Thank you. So if you have something to ask, just leave it in the chat. And so in that Wednesday video, I decided not to talk only on metronome numbers, but to level up a little bit and combine that metronome number to the notational questions, which are interesting and I think important, maybe even essential to talk about. The way I work in studying such pieces, of course, with the Fifth of Beethoven is difficult because we all know that music so well, and we know the metronome numbers. Well, I don't know all metronome numbers by memory of Beethoven symphonies, but of that one, of course, it's rather known. But normally I just play a piece for a while, and I come up with my own tempo based on what I think, my intuition. I try to figure out what the composer had in mind based on the notation, and then I come down, as every musician comes down, to a kind of tempo which is balanced, and that's what all that we do. And I want to make this point before we go into the comments. and the questions, because it's so essential to know that tempo, yes, it is important. That's the reason why I'm fascinating to try to reconstruct what the composer had in mind, which often is impossible. But with these metronome numbers, the great thing is there you have something single beat is double beat, but it's either one of those, assuming that there are not made a zillion misprints and a zillion errors in metronomes and things like that. So that's fascinating. But at the end, the game is just the same. If you take that metronome number, or you take another speed, or you just play it as you used to, as a performer, we have to balance everything. All aspects. We need to listen to the instrument, we need to articulate, we need to phrase, we need to make maybe a little bit of vibrato, whatever you want to do, but at the end it should sound as a really balanced piece. So a lot of the comments I get, maybe not a lot, but I would say from the people who are doubters, but in a strong way, I would say, that this tempo doesn't make any sense and things like that. Well, every tempo makes sense, because you can, well, there's not a story to that. But as a musician, listen to those. I mean, if people are referring to Andras Schiff as a great, great pianist, if he plays the Hammerklavier Sonata, he takes a little bit slower than 138 for the half, which he's advocating for in his famous lecture. But it's a brilliant performance. The question is not whether a tempo is possible or not. Technically, we can discuss about that, but what is the message of the music that's behind the rhetorical aspects, like in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? What is this C minor thing? What does it mean? What is the thing that Beethoven wants to communicate? And of course, there we are on a field. It's not a minefield, as someone wrote, but it is difficult because there is a personal matter. But they used a language which was personal at the same time, but had some aspects, general aspects as well. So the C minor symphony, to me, seeing the intervals of diminished fifths, diminished sevenths, that kind of, those elements, those intervals, they were common also in the Baroque time. For me, it's far from being outraged from anger, like many today see Beethoven, but it's more that of an introvert, very sensitive person, feelings, expressing extreme kind of pain, screaming, yes, but not out of anger. So this introvert kind of aspect, that's what might be the most surprising. What's surprising to me to see that it's when you would play this yourself, it's an experience in this tempo. It's heavy, and that's true. And what's Allegro con brio? We're going to comment on that. But that's the expression, and that's the thing. Tempo is leading to a different expression. So tempo on its own might be the easiest part. What to do with that new speed, that's the difficult part. Okay, so just look at the chat, and then we're going to combine that with reading your comments, some of you, of the comments. David asks if the Fifth Symphony is my favorite symphony. Well, no and yes. I mean, music appeals to me or not, and in Beethoven's case, it almost always does. So I don't have a favorite symphony, and I also don't listen too much, I would say, because once you are on the other side of the spectrum of, and some of you, Larry, for instance, I think you mentioned in one of your comments, I think it was you, that once you're there on the other side, it's difficult to return to this high-speed performances, because you will feel like missing a lot of harmonic progression, tension, time to process all of that. Was also a comment one of you made. Great comment. Okay. Eduardo, great to be able to attend your masterclass today. Well, it's more like a hangout, should say. But I'm proud that you call it a masterclass. Renee asks, when can you tell something about the Okay, the team. Well, we're not going to do the analysis of it. That would be interesting as well, but that's another topic. Certainly for the fifth, it would be interesting. Maybe we should ask Kostas to do that. If the audio is too quiet, I can just level it up. Just let me know. It looks fine. I will raise the volume right now. So if this is better, just let me know. I'm seeing the red signal, so I should not go over that. Anya's in the chat. That's my wife, for those of you who don't know that. And actually, that's the one who makes everything possible, except from you as a viewer and my patrons, because I see some of you in the chat already. So, yeah, scary, Blake Simpson writes. That's exactly what it is. The fifth of Beethoven becomes like this, in my opinion. Well, you have this feeling of being scared a little bit. It's the thumbnail of Wednesday. I was thinking a long time, because the thumbnail is really important for engagement and for it shouldn't be clickbait, but it should be enticing. It should raise a question. And so the combination, I was actually happy with that. The combination from the title with the between the title and the thumbnail, where the message of Beethoven is clearly pointing towards that and towards the most somber and darkest aspects of human life, certainly in the period he went through. Journal entries, we're going to cover that. Let's see if I don't miss anything. The Appassionata, we're going to do that as well. Okay. I will go through your chat and comments now, but I want to share with you one thing that's off topic completely. But if you follow my Instagram account, and perhaps I made some mention that on my YouTube community tab, I don't know. But we went to Record Industries to sign our Pachelbel disc. It's ready, and we secretly brought 2 copies with us. So here it is. So this is the vinyl LP. There is this empty, so the LPs will be inserted now, and we will have them next week. But we are so happy with this. I have to show this first. It's far from Beethoven. I would say 2 generations back. Pachelbel, Bach, Beethoven. But this is made by Shelby Lewis, and if you open that, look at that. I'm actually really proud of this. So you have the benefits of the LP and the back of that. For reason of this live stream of this, I'm gonna give you it, and it's not to be commercial in any aspect. I'm gonna give you a discount code for this live stream if you would like to have a copy. Since the pre-sale was rather okay, I will share with you the link. And really, it's not to push you, but it is a great support. People who buy this disc, here you have it. That's the link to my webpage, the sales page, and here is a discount code. It'll go offline 10 minutes after the chat. So it's just for you as a thank you to be here. We might do that more in the live streams. Okay. There we go, Beethoven 5th. So I'll go through your chats first and then go to the comments, and then vice versa. As we did last week, I'm still figuring out the right or the best way to go through these live streams. When I'm standing at my desk, we will definitely have also some at the clavichord and the piano, but just slowly introducing the live streams. I thought this was a concept that I really was missing in the past. Okay, Dominic is correct. I don't know what that, maybe I missed something. Matthew, thank you for making these videos. You're welcome. Which transcription do you use for Beethoven? Oh, I just grabbed one that I had. I'm not, I mean, I do think it's important to have urtext editions, and I use them whenever I have the chance. But I don't mind playing just from a score that I just happen to have. This is Otto Singer. I think it's early 20th century or late 19th century. When I have the pianoforte, I will look into Hummel's transcriptions. Liszt is, of course, brilliant, a little bit more difficult. But Hummel is sometimes great. Okay. Favorite is the Seventh Symphony. Yes, yeah, I know it, but we're going to do that. Actually, with the pianoforte, I plan to record all the Beethoven symphonies, maybe four-handed. So quatre mains. Welcome, André. So I just reading, trying. Adam asks how long we have been married. Well, Anya will ask you that in the chat. Answer you that. It's 18 years. Anya, is indeed everything behind the scenes that a man could wish for, and let's leave it with this level of detail. Kirk, he writes, I think I prefer the slower tempo of your piano cover of Symphony No. 5. Thank you. And so, to make it clear to all, also in the comments, I expressively mentioned this at the end of the video. We're all on the same side. It doesn't appear to be that way, though. Sometimes we forget it. The temperature gets really hot. I will not go on Facebook with this, because you will find yourself spending a lot of time just playing this yes-no game, which is at the end very fatiguing, and it leads to nowhere. What's the interesting point is raising questions, and if people approach me as if I am preaching something of which I am so sure that I find that everybody should follow that, that's far from the truth. What I do is sharing my excitement, my fascination for this, and what in general I'm doing, and that's actually led to all of this. For a very long time, the basis actually for this tempo research became actually practically I started with that still where at the time when I was studying in Amsterdam, both organ and piano. And so I was totally unaware of this discrepancy, that when I've played a Bach Allegro, it was in a total different tempo than when in piano class I played a Mozart Allegro. There was one day, and I still remember that, opening my bicycle. Everything in Amsterdam happens by bicycle, and by the way, I was a student, so I had, of course I had a bicycle, and I realized still that I was playing a Mozart sonata, I think the F major, 332, I think, I don't know. And I went to the Waalse-kerk, which is the Walloon church with the beautiful Müller organ, and I was about to play a trio sonata by Bach. So I had lessons from Jacques van Nootmester, and I realized exactly what I was saying now, that how comes that the trio sonata went so much slower than the Mozart. And so there I started to look into kind of solutions. I talked about that with Jacques van Nootmester, but in the 90s, everything related to tempo was kind of, and you didn't speak about that. Let me say it like that. If you came out with the message that you were interested in metronome numbers, you would be painted as a musician who didn't know how to choose tempo, was boring, and was so. Jacques was really a kind of, yeah. Well, he didn't open the discussion in Amsterdam in the conservatory, which I really understand, but that moment triggered it all. And then came a tempo symposium 1 year later with Talsma. Actually was one of the few times Talsma still was in Holland, so I've actually seen him, I've played for him. I met Clemens van Gleich, all the other people, and so I got involved in this. And then I met Lorenz Gradient in 2009, I believe. But to give you that background, to make the story complete, it's only 3 years ago when he visited me, and we had always struggles on the slow movements. I said, Lorenz, it's not possible that that's double beat. But then we made that ping pong video together, you know, the one where I play ping pong at the beginning. And I was thinking to myself, when there is no evidence of the variable use of metronome, it's either single or double beat. And it became so simple. And I tried to take those slow movements serious as well. And that was a world opened for me. And that's the main message I cannot give enough. You have to try it over and over again. It comes with a new way of playing. And maybe I'm in a little bit, I'm in a position where I had lessons in Amsterdam just with Jacques van Ootmessen pointing towards all of this. I can just apply everything I've learned with from my Bach playing in Amsterdam on organ to the clavichord and to the piano. It's basically the same language. It's changed a little bit. It's a bit more cantabile, a bit more legato, but actually Bach had that already in some regards. But you have to try it, and then you see in the scores things that you will never have seen before. And so it happened also with the slow movements in my case. So, but we're all on the same side. The second movement of the fifth this week, I wouldn't say that. That's one of the best movements, I think. I mean, that's great music. But also there it's andante con moto, not too fast. The logo looks great, thank you. Shelby has done that. Shelby Lewis, early music maker, look him up. I wouldn't compose. Emil asked why not compose your own Fifth Symphony. It would be rather boring music. I'm not a composer, not even a great improviser. That's something we were not taught in the 90s. We were taught to be performers. Yeah. Shurgi, I certainly mispronounce your name. I enjoyed the debates. Everyone ends up learning more about themselves regardless. That's the spirit. Do you know, Eduardo asked if there is an orchestral version of Beethoven's Fifth? But yes, there is a Brazilian guy named, I forget his name, who actually recorded a lot of this according to the Talsma theory. So that's a variable theory. But there you can actually hear that it comes with a different performance practice. You cannot just take a symphonic orchestra and play as if you were playing fast, but then in a slower pace. It doesn't work. But there, yeah, you can have a kind of feeling of what is looking like. By the way, we're going to launch our Impossible project, which is a silly idea I have, that within 10 years I would be able to conduct the 9 symphonies of Beethoven myself, which is like Elon Musk going to Mars. They know at Tesla that it's not possible. I hope it's possible in my case, but at least the focus is towards that direction. Quadil, I find your general proposition regarding metronome marks seductive, and it makes the connection between Beethoven and Schubert more eloquent. Yeah, great remark. I once played a concert and someone came to me and said, now I've got it. Schubert sounds like Beethoven and not vice versa. I say, well, great. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Glenn Gould in his love of playing. Adam writes, then there's a question, but how are we to deal with the premiere of the 5th, 6th C major mass choral Fantasia and so on, which is supposed to have started at 6:30 p.m. and ended around 10:30 p.m. So that is the famous, I think, 1808 concert that lasted 4 hours or even a little bit longer. Some of you have asked me that. It's also in the comments we're going to read. But in fact, those questions are really difficult to answer, because what are the tempi that were used? Beethoven was complaining on them. People were complaining. We should not, well, let me rephrase that. In a lot of reactions that doubt about this, they say, well, it's not possible that this was considered to be fast in those days. We have secretly perhaps, or unknowingly perhaps, adapted the kind of late 19th century idea that those composers were a kind of gods. Like, for instance, also Liszt, they just could play anything. And we are just so much worse than they were. So Beethoven, he just could do it. The Hammerklavier would be no problem for him. Czerny could do it. Liszt was the only one who could do it. So this focus towards these technical difficulties, the challenge, the unreachable ideal, that's pure romantic nonsense, I would say. And I don't blame anything from believing in that. There's no way that Beethoven would have the same technique as if you are finished a high-level conservatory today. No way. It's not possible. He must have had a very good technique, and in his time extraordinary perhaps, like Mozart had. But they haven't played the Liszt Transcendental Etudes, they haven't played Rachmaninoff Concerto, because if they would have had that level of technique, they would have written that, they would have given that music. So we should be very careful to project our current standard to what their standard was. It's 2 centuries ago. In technical sense, that's a really long time. Someone asked me once, or just commented once, it's like saying that in 1890 we ran the 100 meters at the World Championship faster than today. It's not the case. It's not, of course, a scientific argument, but it's something that can open a perspective. Music would have been the only branch, so to say, of science, whatever, or I don't know even how to name that, where the evolution decreased instead of increased. It's not like that, and also it's not documented like that. Technique increased, the level of pianists and other musicians technically increased. We can go on and on this. So knowing exactly in a 4-hour concert what were the time durations, that's difficult. For single pieces, this is of course something else, and also there you have to be very careful. It's interesting though, so I would encourage to make the reconstructions, and some of you reached out to me with their calculations. That's really worth doing, but at the end it's not giving you the key to solve everything. There is no such thing. There's only a way of stepping back, looking over the complete landscape and seeing where the problematical facts are. And one of the first layers of those in reconstructing those tempi, if you talk about that, are the metronome numbers. We've talked about notation in that Wednesday video, which is crucial actually. But on the other hand, how happy we should be to have those metronome numbers, because those two need to match. But if you step back and you overlook the landscape of metronome numbers, which no one today has done because there is no such database of all metronome numbers, can you imagine that in our 60 years old historically informed performance practice? So that information is actually not available. But if you do overlook a portion of that, they're all the same, and many of them we can have a debate of which exactly are unplayable, but many of them they simply don't make sense. Remember a Facebook discussion where someone was really happy to show that finally the Opus 299 number 1 was played in exactly 96 for the half note. I think that's the tempo, which was on a Steinway in a concert hall by a very experienced pianist, by the way, not a student, not a beginner. But anyway, performance was really bad. He succeeded in that, not articulated, where the 16th notes rushed at the top. There was just a kind of glissando. But then I said, yeah, now number 2. So this is a discussion that ends anyway. You come to the point where you have to say, either they don't make sense or they do make sense. And if we accept all of that, then this is golden information. It's like a CD recording of those people. They weren't just giving numbers to project kind of ideal speeds. Literally, this was said also in those Facebook discussions, but people have published things. I mean, it was kind of ideal journey put out to give the impression to students that if they would come to Czerny to learn to play the piano, that they would play that fast. I mean, that's an argument that on an academical level was given. I mean, and if the other side comes down with sources and with other things, raise questions, or put the right questions, try to put the right questions, that's then not back. That's not historical, or that's not, would I say, proven. But at the end, that's what you have to do. Take the facts and make your own decisions, and come to the things that are difficult to explain and things that are, yeah, falls in place. And that's what I do. not preaching that everybody should follow that. Okay. Just going a little bit back. I'm talking too long. That's not one of my... Be brief on topics, and I'm talking to myself. It's not in the chat, but there's so many aspects to cover. Charles asked what would the modern version of the metronome mark for the second movement would be. I don't know from memory, but I believe it's an andante, if I'm not mistaken, and it's just, yeah, half the note value. I believe then you come to something like 8 note 63, but that's just from memory. As said, I don't have all numbers in my mind. And in this book there aren't any metronome numbers. Yeah, Gardner's interpretation of Bach. To be honest, I am not so familiar with that. Your ideas about the tempo, musical intentions, ask. Your ideas about tempo are encouraging to me. I'm now more hopeful about learning certain repertoire. Yeah, that's great. And that's true. It opens more repertoire for more people. And that's also a kind of red line in some comments. You can just wait for it to happen. If the Hammerklavier is what you play is a right tempo, then everybody can play it. So what's wrong with that? As if Beethoven wrote a piece that would only be playable and even unplayable after 150 years. But Liszt could play it. And comments like this, I mean, I understand them. But step back, look to the facts. Liszt could play the Hammerklavier, 1930 or something. Yes. Beethoven said this piece is going to keep pianists over the next 50 years busy. Yes, but what did they mean? What did he mean with that? Maybe the extreme long Adagio section, that's new. The outer section are really difficult also in single beat, by the way. Tempo is on its own not the difficulty. When you want to speed up, I will make a series of videos on that soon. It's happening here. You have to train your fingers, but speed is happening in your brain. You have to read faster, you have to think faster, and then your fingers will follow. A little bit more of practice, that's true. Joseph asked, are there English translation books regarding the early tempo periods, and if so, do you have any suggestion? No. Of course, with Lorenz I'm working on a project which leads to a new publication of his book. It will be a completely different book, and I'm going to make an ebook or something like that where I give my approach, also notation that if you would have gone through that, you can read a Bach score and you can read a Mozart score. It's not so many secrets behind. Basically, it's simple, but you need to know a certain amount of correlations and go back into time a little bit. That I'm going to do. So hopefully that will answer to your question. Eddie Ward, do you think professional players play the symphony better than the players of Beethoven at the time? There is no doubt about that. I mean, how the 19th century, there the conservatories came, people were trained technically. There's 150 years of technical training that in Beethoven's days. I mean, when Mozart played his Zauberflöte, he had to find some musicians in the army. I mean, people who were playing some in the army brass bands or whatever. That's the level we're talking about. You had very good orchestras, by the way. But I think we overestimate the level of performance back then. Liszt is to be documented as one of the greatest musicians, pianists living in his time. I mean, documents from his time where he played apparently a lot of wrong notes. Still, they didn't care. He was not studying the most, he was not following the score the most, but he was, musically speaking, the most telling, the most engaging pianist. So it's so dangerous to project what we believe today as a truth that was accepted back then. That's a difficulty, that's a fascination. You have to expand the context around those quotes. Otherwise, they are just two-dimensional, meaningless things. Certainly, if you just want to prove something is right. Okay. Charles asks, have you come across any writings from later 19th century which say metronome marks used to be like this, but now they are like that? You would expect something to notice that there are two standards. Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, I have gone through all of that myself. Where is this change of this metrical use? So this full swing of the metronome to the single beat. I think the answer is not so easy. Apparently, both usages have been existed next to each other, but the metronome used single beat was used as a timekeeper, just to keep you in time, force you in time. That's the annoying use. That's why we hate the metronome so much, because still many of us are trained with that. A little bit faster, metronome goes up, a little bit faster, metronome goes up. And of course that device ticks, and it's annoying because it doesn't follow these small fluctuations that every musician has. And the other use is in use as a time indicator, not as a timekeeper. And the difference between those two usages, there people have been writing about that. Not so much because it was common sense, but it does exist. Actually, the Melzel 1816 instructions, which I mentioned at the end of the Wednesday video, they're actually clear. They're not sure written by Melzel, but 1816 published in London, I believe, and then translated a year later in Vienna and Leipzig. So we have two translations of the same text, which is very interesting, because there you have a context. You have an interpreter, translator from an English text, and you have another one. We can come back to that. So even Anton Webern, someone pointed out to me, sent a mail, gives time durations which compared to his metronome markings in 1934 are just, he played it half slower than his metronome markings, exactly. We will have a story about Raul Puño soon. It's the Max Reger story with Marcel Punt. It's on my channel. Those videos are not watched a lot, but it's really mind-blowing. Max Reger, early 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, with Karl Straube, his main performer, friends, same conservatory. Max Reger's metronome numbers double those of Straube. So strange. Fugue, last movement of the Hammerklavier Sonata. Yeah, that, I mean, just go to your piano, take the metronome number of Beethoven, consider it to be metrical, and you will be amazed. That works great. Yeah, Ali asks, how come your tempo is slow compared to today's tempo? Keep in mind it's allegro con brio, not allegretto. Yeah, let me drink. That's a question that will appear in the comments as well, so I can answer it now as well. Yeah, so allegro con brio compared with what? You mentioned allegretto, but allegretto compared to what? I would say if you compare our current connotations, I mean understandings of the Italian tempo words with the tempo I was playing in the Beethoven Fifth, there would not be even allegretto. It would be maybe andante con moto even. I mean, we changed a lot. I'll give you in future videos, I just have to schedule them. There is a beautiful quote from Saint-Saëns, where Saint-Saëns writes, and it's not something I found, someone of the viewers gave that to me, in his 1915, I believe, edition of, I forgot what kind of music, Mozart or something else, a kind of historical edition, where he writes in the preface that the player of 1915 apparently should be aware of the fact that what for Mozart was an allegro, now he says that what for Mozart was a presto, nowadays for us is an allegro. And what for Mozart, I'm just quoting from memory now, for Mozart was an andante con moto is an andante in our days. So this ties into this principle of speeding up. And there is another, Widor said the same thing, Jean-Marie Widor, we made a video on that, and there is another guy who said the same thing, but I forgot about it. And then I will come with another source, exactly the same thing. I think it's 1817 in a magazine on Kirchenmusik, so church music, who says the same thing in 1870. So if you have 4 or 5 of such same quotes over a period of 50 years, 40 years perhaps, then you get a contextual evidence. Together it forms a kind of proof that if you take the double beat standpoint of those metronome numbers, that might be the right direction. On its own, it's hard. All need the metronome numbers, the playability of that, because if you once come across someone who says, well, it is documented in those days that those metronome numbers were unreachable, that's not true. I didn't come across one single source that mentions that, even at the Hammerklavier Sonata. Be aware of how fast people may, and I did it myself, everybody does it, but be aware of that trap. Beethoven makes that statement that that sonata will keep people busy for the next 50 years. Liszt says it's a difficult sonata, so it's unplayable. They didn't say that. Moscheles and Czerny, they both commented on the metronome number of half note 138 as being too fast. So listen to the arguments, hence it's unplayable. No, they didn't say that's unplayable. To their taste, it's too fast. And to be honest, to my taste, 138 for the quarter is too fast for that piece in my taste. So I would play it a little bit slower even. But they don't say it's unplayable. Jenny says it's really difficult, but that's something else. So it's important not only to make this contextual evidence right, but to be detailed and nuanced and never look to what you want to prove yourself. And it's dangerous for all of us, for me also. But I hope I step back enough to not let it happen in a great deal. Okay. I'm losing the chat a little bit in a way that's going too fast. So if I skip one of your questions, don't hesitate to write it again. John is here as well, commenting on someone else. Yeah, Mapo, your question about book article I just answered. I will write my own. And actually, I'm planning to do this for 2 months, and I need to schedule this because people ask me the basics for that, which I sometimes think it's really simple, but yeah. I'm studying this 25 years and maybe sometimes I forget about that. Okay. Numbers on my credit card won't help you much, I think, Jason. Dylan asked, I'm interested in the motive. I think you mean the knocking on the door. That was something that many asked. Also, it's a quote, or it's something that Anton Schindler actually writes about. And in his words, is coming from Beethoven. Now, Anton Schindler is someone who's been discredited a lot. I think it's a pity because he gives descriptions of Beethoven's playing that if you just look at it very closely, it's remarkably detailed. So he was a strange guy. And after Beethoven's death, we were not going to make an episode on Schindler here. You should remember and not forget that he was one of the few who defended, who kept Beethoven's legacy alive. Beethoven wasn't played a lot. It changed rapidly from the 1840s, but in the 1830s, there were only a few sonatas who were played. So, on Schindler, we're going to make some episodes. Yeah, so Yuri Kowaleski is an important question. I totally, and it's great, guys, because just by going through the chat, I can almost skip the comments, but we're going to do them anyway because I've mentioned to some of you, if you're in the chat, that I'm going to comment on your question. I'm going to do that, but let me keep an eye on the hour. You say, I totally agree, but what surprises me is the fact that Kozalski, being a student of Mikuli, neglected the old metrical way. They didn't neglect that, they just weren't interested. It's progression. Nobody looked back. before 1960. They threw away here in Flanders, and in Holland maybe a little bit less. They're a little bit more conservative. I wouldn't go too much more in detail, because if there are some people from the Netherlands, you would know what I was going to say. But anyway, they threw away historical organs in 1975 here. That we think, how is that possible? 18th century historical organs in original condition, they were just thrown away for the sake of progression. Charles Tournemire had the César Franck organ restored in the 1930s, completely electrified. He changed the wind chest positions, and afterwards they were really happy, because they what César Franck would have left at. What they didn't know is that they just ruined one of the most unique romantic organs that has not a counterpart. It was a unique organ César Franck played, but they didn't care. They just looked forward. So that's the Raúl Puño thing I'm going to do. Sometimes there is a glimpse of that a piece that they care about is being played in a really different way, and then they're going to talk about. But in general, those recordings of around 1900, they give an impression of how people played back then. Even if there were students of Chopin, they assumed that was time. And so the metronome numbers were neglected. You see that in later 19th century editions, those metronome numbers that were always there at the beginning, early 19th century editions, they more and more disappeared. Nobody cared about that anymore. But the real detailed explanation and context, that's something that we need to study, and it's a study on its own. Okay. Robert Bites, Dylan, but I'm sure it's somewhere in the Renaissance Madrigal though. Okay. Musical intentions will be encouraged. We need to do that. We need to be. After more than a year, I'm used to it. To stand in the wind a little bit. I appreciate your work so much. Thank you. It confirms many music instincts. Yeah. That's hard to agree with, because if you're on the other side, you would say, yeah, that's an easy argument. But it's a strange thing, though. Just practically, I can say it to you, but how often it happens that just if you do this for a while, as I'm doing now, how fast you adapt a new piece to a tempo that afterwards is just exactly the metronome number that J.S. Bach gave. I mean, in the range of 5 to 10%, and sometimes even spot on. There is something that we still have as musicians. We have to open ourselves to a little bit of different way of playing. Okay, it's about Renaissance music. I'm going to make an episode on Renaissance music, and the title will be "We Play It Too Slow." It's also leading to Mersenne. Very, very briefly, Mersenne writes about the tempo or the semi-brevis in Renaissance music. So, for instance, Sweelinck, he says that's 1 second. So that would mean that we would have to play 16 in the hexachordon fantasy of Sweelinck, maybe even over 20 notes a second. That's a double second there. That's a metrical second, but that's another episode. Okay. Thomas, I'm not sure you're discussing the motive and metronome speed, but I remember hearing this in New York, USA, and Beethoven used his birdsong for the motive, in my opinion. Yeah. Someone reached out to me about the same. I mean, a bird motive is something you can take serious or not. There was a little clip that's the butcher bird in English. I don't remember. It really sings this deep ta 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 dum, and it wasn't that tempo. But yeah, what can you say? I mean, it's just a clip, and maybe they have just manipulated that. And even if it would sing the same tempo or not, I mean, how would Beethoven translate that? But it's an interesting thing. It's like with the durations of concerts, we should collect all of that. Going to make a project around of that, so stay tuned if you want to collaborate with that. We need some manpower to do that. Darwin, Darwinian pickles. Wim, could you re-articulate the reasons for the slower than conventional tempo for your interpretation of Beethoven's Fifth? My understanding is that back in Beethoven's time, each click of a metronome counted as a beat. Well, that's actually what musicologists today in general want to believe, but that's of course the whole debate. What is a beat? What is a vibration? What's an oscillation? What is a vibration? What is a Schlag? What are Schläge? The plural of Schlag? That's all terminology. If people who are dealing with physics, I don't know in English, are talking today about a swing, they mean a full swing. So they will not explain to each other, hey, remember, this is full swing and this is single swing. So it's important to reconstruct all of these definitions. Vibration, for instance, in French is really, really important, of course, to the pendulum notation. But there is, in the mid of 18th century, the Académie Française, very high standard regulative. I mean, there was an apparatus, so to say, that wanted to regulate everything in France, and that's a single beat definition. So many will say, hey, that's written there, single beat, so everything is single beat. Well, but if you travel back in time 15 years, it's clearly double beat. So the 1816 Melzer instructions, read those. And I should have made a video much longer about this, and apparently I was forgotten about it, and Lorenz pointed that out to me. For him it's not so interesting, because he said, well, it's just, you have to go deeper than that. But there you have it. That instructions is not to be read without contradiction, if not accepting the double beat. So the full swing for Schlag or for beat. Okay. When you talk about, Adam writes about too fast for taste, it reminded me of Chopin's Tristesse Etude. He marked it 100 beat per minute when it's mostly played at 30-40. Yeah, I'm going to record that as well. So stay tuned for that. There is another Chopin Etude coming, but that one is a great example of double beat. There is, I mean, it's for everybody, so logical. It's like the Traumerei of Schumann. I mean, if you then beat it up to single beat, then you feel the astonishment. But imagine that what I was saying all the time is true. And those people come back to our time. And imagine that Beethoven's symphony was played in my speed, just saying, hypothetically. What would those composers think if they heard performances of today? And that concerns me also. I mean, that fascination is partly to, when I study, there's a weird thing, but I've always a feeling, it's not true, but I study as if the composer hears me playing. Of course, I know that it's not true, so I don't think I'm acting weird now, but it's kind of responsibility of what they left. And, well, everybody needs to do with that what he wants. Eddie Ward, is it normal? I have passion for classical music. I've listened at least for 3 hours every day. Okay. Joseph, did Beethoven get the first 4 notes on the Fifth Symphony from someone knocking on his door? I don't know. It can be a kind of description of what the feeling is. It's fate. I mean, it fits perfectly, and that's the reason why it survived so long. Actually, in this score that I'm playing from, it's early 19th century, but it's written there. The teacher, I think, I don't know who, has written it. Let me show you. Can you see that? Zo klopt het noodlot op de deur in Old Dutch. So yeah, it fits perfectly. If it's a bird song, it's an inspirational thing. Interesting though, if you dive into the technical side, notation-wise, and it's also in the comments, then someone said, well, now for the first time I hear that it's not an A beat at the beginning. It's not ta-ta-ta-tam, it's ta-ta-ta-tam. And so that bar indeed stands on its own. And I've never thought on that, because that's a great argument. It's not an upbeat first, which if you have it so fast, then it becomes an upbeat. Ta-ta-ta-tam, ta-ta-ta-tam. Even triplets, 16 triplets. I didn't went so far as describing Benjamin Zander's performance as being triplets. He tries to not to play it like triplets, but it's inevitable if you go so fast. But that upbeat thing, that's a great argument. I mean, again, not to prove anything, but to build that contextual evidence or the contextual reconstruction. Okay. Yeah, River Bites, the birdsong theory. Vestiel, what do you think on how slow Beethoven's Adagio is? I like how slow with the third movement of his Ninth Symphony will be using your theory compared to today's. Well, I cannot say that from memory. Again, for me, the slow movements, that's something I rediscovered with the Mozart Munich sonatas. I've said it before, there is the D major Adagio, and the last one, go and check it, it's on my channel. That's the piece where everything started for me to say, well, this is double beat, according to Czerny and Moschles. There is technically not possible to play that in those speeds. So you have then, it depends on the notation. So the more condensed and the more use of note values. Typically, you just take two adagios, have one with an open structure. For instance, Mozart, I believe his first Munich sonata has second part an adagio and an andante, but it's a very open one. And then go to that adagio, the sixth in the D-dur and the D major. That's so condensed with articulation markings on 30-second notes, trills on 30-second notes. And there you have a speed indication of about, was it 8th note 100, something like that. So that clearly is 16th note 100. And that's strange at the beginning of that piece because you have 4 8 notes, which seems to last longer than expected. But it simply works great. You need slow movements. That's the great challenge to for some pieces. Still, for me also, middle part of the partitique becomes really slow. Oh, okay, continue. It's great to have all those questions. Larry asked a link to the 1860 Mendelssohn metronome instructions. I have to dive them up on my computer. I copied them from some books that I have. It's published in English in London. I don't know exactly where. Ron, I think that many notes get lost when hearing the symphony played by an orchestra. Do you think that besides the tempo, maybe we should use also smaller? I don't know. I know it's a hip thing to make orchestras smaller, but still, I think that's great. I mean, you come to the essence. It's like the most beautiful orchestra is a string quartet, right? I mean, that's so in the polyphonic transparency you get there. But remember that very short after Beethoven's death, and maybe even during his life, you had those performances of the Ninth Symphony. Moschles describes one. Is that with Mendelssohn or someone else? Could be. Over 900 participants. They just loved it. Everything, the bigger the better. That's my point. The faster the better, soon. Okay. Yeah, that's the name, Maximiliano Cobra. He made a recording of many of those classical pieces in Talsma tempo, so variable. He didn't use a double beat for the slow movements. It's a great attempt. It didn't came from the ground really, and part of that is because it didn't come with a new performance practice culture. You need to open the minds of musicians a little bit, give some context, and take a little bit of time for a different approach, which shouldn't be too difficult, but it's not only stepping back from those fast tempi, you accept also another way of performing with more accentuations. We've talked about that, and we'll make another topic on that. Okay. Let me just dive into the comments real quick. It's about an hour now. Not that I care that I am under a pressure for time, but I don't want to take more of your time than necessary. So if everything is all right, here you see technically I'm totally part of my time. I just click one button, see, from me to So I've copied your questions or some of your comments, because last time I went all down to the bottom, which was a little bit of a pity. And again, I have to find the right format for these live streams. So if you have suggestions, please give them. So Adam is in the live stream, in the chat. I've seen you. There was a great question talking about orchestras. We've talked about that. Would you consider Beethoven a classical or romantic composer? It depends on the definition. I never think in such boxes, but really never. For me, everything is an evolution, and that's really difficult for music history books, because how are you going to define everything? Beethoven was a bridge between everything, like Mozart was. Mozart, in a way, was Beethoven. What he did in his Munich sonatas is incredibly romantic. So if you would say romantic is what Richard Wagner at a high point was, then Beethoven certainly is leaning towards that. Certainly. But his roots are classical, as Chopin's roots are classical. Just practicing now and playing the Hammerklavier more and other pieces by Beethoven that I just have skipped because I didn't have a pianoforte. Oh boy, it's just hearing Chopin from time to time harmonically. Okay, so difficult to say yes or no. Lars Fransen, he said excellent video. Yeah, he makes the point actually that if he performs newer work, that composers are always happy when the tempo is in balance, and that we talked about at the beginning. That's true. When the tempo is balanced, the music should be okay, but what's the message? And don't forget that composers today not necessarily anymore are great performers. So when Beethoven had something in mind, he thought from the perspective of a performer more than in our days. Just having an eye on the chat. Like Benjamin Zander, compared to your tempo, Zander's tempo is ridiculously fast. Well, I think too that, well, yeah, we're not going to comment on Zander here. Lars, there you are. Just was reading your question. If you have time, of course I have. Common sense would seem to confirm your claim that the general standards of performance increased with the introduction of conservatory. And yeah, I think that makes sense. It's, well, you cannot prove that. That's something 20th century that we want to have it for sure. But put it on a timeline, and that's the most possible thing to assume. Here's an idea that one guy says. Maybe another contributing factor to the speeding up of symphonies was the attention span of later audiences. I don't know if you see Wagner, but it's interesting because do see Wagner operas and things. I mean, it takes a week sometimes. So it shouldn't surprise us that Beethoven led the way to all of that. And those hour-long performances, yeah, it was something that they embraced. And just reconstruct Mozart's day even. Not that I am the greatest specialist on that, but I've read once that Mozart went out in the afternoon and returned after midnight just to attend a home concert that lasted for 8-9 hours. It's 2 centuries ago. Oh, Andre says for the slow movements of 550 Cobra did use double beat. Okay, great. Didn't know that. Musical intentions. I have a student whose family is from the northern Belgium. Well, not far from where I live. Northern Belgium is Antwerp. I have started studying Dutch and I'm enjoying it. So great. Looking forward to your comments in Dutch then. Well, I'll correct them if you want me to. Yeah, Marios, don't get me wrong, I'm just asking questions. That's the thing. We're on the same side, and at the end we shake hands and we go our own directions because we have a responsibility as musicians to translate those notes to our audiences. And so it's for me so fascinating to have this platform on YouTube to explain what I'm doing. Well, it's not explanation, but sharing. Of course, in a video format, you have to make a video as if you make a point, right? It's difficult to be nuanced because also well, I try to be, but the topic is taking to such extremes. It's not true, it's true. But we should come to a platform where we can ask questions based on the same facts, and then just we continue and we come back and we exchange opinions again. But at the end, we play for an audience that should embrace the music we make. That's what it is about. Fidel writes, Beethoven was evolutionary, not revolutionary. Yeah, both. I mean, I had the privilege when that clavichord was here in 2009. I think I only played Mozart and Bach for 1 year. Can you imagine that? And that's one of the things I do. Focus. I can focus really, but that's also not always a good. That's not a good habit of mine. But anyway, when I then returned to Beethoven's first sonatas, this was like a shock. It was like one generation that was missing. I mean, he was an explosion in novelties on all. I mean, he opened the 19th century. Mozart probably would have done that also. Just see the evolution in his later years. It's the greatest, one of the greatest losses in history. But anyway, I mean, evolution history, of course. Let me go. Just reading here. Mohammed, great to have you. The age of Twitter, yes. Okay, here. Bach, ING, Matt, he is a long time subscriber. Let me see what this question was about. Good arguments for your case, but some people will never be convinced. Yeah, it's changes, no problem. I'm a definite fan of life, the slow lane, and so on and so on. Whether or not others like it is down to their taste and not faulty of the composer. The virtuoso playing fast argument is also dubious, as nimble fingers alone do not produce a good performance. Playing super fast gives hiding places for minor errors, perhaps slightly incorrect timing or a missed note. At slower speeds there is nowhere to hide, and I think it's probably harder to play well slowly than to rush through a piece. Well, I've copied this comment, this thought, because it's really true. In those days, if you read, remember that when Mozart met, what's the name? I've made a video on that even. It's not Clementi. When he was in Mannheim, I believe. The name will drop. He complained because he had to play the slow movements, which are the most difficult ones. So most difficult here. Some adagios, of course, are difficult with the elaborations and things like that, but it's hitting the right expression. It's much more difficult, guys. I can promise you that. I mean, speeding up is the easiest thing to do, because indeed timings are not important, not so important anymore. There is less to miss. Timings, if you play this all tempi, that's my experience, you get so many opportunities to have this tension span almost to a breaking point. And that's where the magic happens. Leopold Mozart writes about it, it's very clear. But not using that, or not giving this really strong pulse from the beginning, this rhythmical pulse, not initiating this, then it's maybe a little bit like in the Cobra performances. It gets boring. If you then just speed up, there's less to process for the audience. It goes faster. You have this rhythmical excitement, as in Benjamin Zander's performance. It's just about this. And we're used to that. For me, it's hard to listen to that because I get very nervous, I should say. It's no, not commenting on those performances. But going the other direction, it's not easier. Yeah, Larry, that's true about Cobra. I didn't meet the guy. I would love to meet him. Maybe I just maybe have to reach out to him. It's I don't know his background, but just having a symphonic orchestra at his disposal to try this out, that's, oh man, I would love to have. And I wouldn't care too much if it's in period instruments or just a symphonic orchestra. Obviously a period orchestra would, but who knows? I mean, that's the impossible project for the coming 10 years. Sure, Guillaume, yeah, tried listening to super fast virtuosos at 75%. No, never do that, because they have a truthful story to tell. I mean, don't speed my performances up because they won't work. It can give you an impression of how it sounds, but all the timings, and of course the great pianists and players, they make use of that even at very high speeds. So if you slow that down, it gives you not in the right, I mean, they give you not their story. Okay, what we have here, yeah, that's the story of this 4-hour concert. And Udina, no, Sorim, he or she is referring to Richter with the D960 of Schubert. That I'm going to share with you because there's no metronome number for that, but just based on the notation, he plays in what would have been double beat if that piece would have a metronome number. So that's the thing, guys. You can reconstruct all of that. If you have, we have so many metronome numbers, you have to take not only those speeds, they were not kind of individual speeds. Yeah, the details there were a little bit shifts, but it was based on the notation. Mosler's Czerny, all those people, they could read the score. So there is not so much mystery in that. Not saying that it's easy. Okay. Kirk Weiblinger. A question: if the metronome indicated beat subdivisions as well, how would this scheme be adapted to time signatures with 3 subdivisions per beat? For instance, if you have half, dotted half, 120 and 6 hours. Yeah, that's a compound time. I get the question a lot, which I understand. But that's actually very, very easy. If you have a pendulum, that's really easy. There is a video in the playlist with Lawrence. Just go on my channel on the homepage, click playlist, go to interviews, Lawrence or something, and then look for Tactus Inequalis and Lafia or something. And there we show that with the pendulum, which is really easy. With the metronome, it's perfectly doable as well as with the digital. So here you have 120. So you take that tempo, tam, tam, pam, 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 and tam, 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 pam, 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 pam. There you have your 8 notes. It's simple as that. And the old tradition of the tactus inequalis, where the up, down, so the twofold unity, tactus is by definition a twofold element. It has arsistasis, it has up, down, left, right, all those double things. You see that everywhere. So they didn't get rid of that with the pendulum. It's tactus inequalis, so instead of chuck, 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 you had chuck, ba-tum, ta-tum, and we actually conduct like that still. Okay. We're trying to wrap this up, 1 hour and 15 minutes. If you're still there. Okay, I do like the slower tempo, and it does make sense of the 2/4 time, and the repeated notes are in fact 8 notes. Yes, but I also agree with another remark here that the rubato to very musical would not be employed in an orchestral performance, and that it stops the piece from moving forward, as one might expect. Yes, okay. So he asked if I would have the luxury of recording this, of playing this with an orchestra, if I would do the same, and the answer is perhaps a little bit less. Of course, you're sitting on your own at the piano. It's a different language, but certainly in the same direction. This moving forward thing, that's one of the main elements to speed up. You rush to that ta-ta-ta-tam, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-tam, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, and you want to go faster. It's ta-ta-ta-tam, you have to feel this inner peace. Certainly for the slower movements. Tom pom pom pom. And I listen to the silence. Tom pom pom pom. And then let the piece build itself. Rom pom pom taram pom 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 param pom 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 pom. And so you start seeing this language, these people, or these voices, whatever, talking to each other. Tom pom pom pa ding ding tom pom 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 pom. dee dum, but always this movement, and it becomes really powerful. And so if you have set this movement up this line, you can go a little bit slower, you can get a little bit faster, and that is really where the magic happens. And that's what I was talking about. You cannot just take an orchestra, have it play differently, because we are used to just play through. And Xander is a very extreme example. He just rushes over everything. But the opposite thing is also true. So yeah, I think I would pay attention, extreme attention to the silences. It's hard to say, but I'm so convinced that when I could work with an orchestra for a month, for the Fifth of Beethoven, you would be, I mean, that would be so, the impression would have emotionally, that would make such an impression. This is a great, great, great piece. Yeah, I'm saying that the Fifth of Beethoven is a great piece. What kind of news am I sharing now? Okay, Jeremy Weisman, this is not being played at anything 108, most is 120 plus. Yeah, okay. But that's a remark I sometimes get, often get. People not used to it anymore to really know what tempo you're playing in. So yeah, it's 108. I can speed up a little bit, I can go back. That's tempo rubato. It's not the same as saying that metronome number was only meant for the beginning, and then you can drop. If Beethoven says that and others says that too, modulus for instance, it means it's a baseline way. Of course, you cannot have this metronome ticking all the way. You go a little bit faster, you go a little bit slower. You've said we must adapt one theory or the other. Well, if you want to reconstruct Beethoven, interesting, my Dutch professor always stressed that to look to one system to answer all questions was folly, but never mind. Yeah, okay. That I'm not doing, because, but you have to decide at the end of the day, which system are you going to follow? And for me, the majority of the elements are so strongly pointing towards that metrically thing of the metronome. But it's this and so on, so on. It's okay. In fact, you seem to be taking Beethoven's own advice when he writes at the metronome. No, okay, I don't think that's the case. How is that different from a performance that starts faster and then has some sections slower? Well, that only proves that the tempo that has been taken is wrong, or the composer is wrong. I'm not saying anything about very late romantic music, but in Beethoven's time, you start at the tempo and you keep that tempo. There is no such thing as really big ritardandos, slowing downs. It didn't exist. And I'm saying that because it's not described as such. Even Chopin was rather strict in playing in time. So rubato is something in that time that was kind of new. In the 18th century, it just meant kind of elaborated right hands, while the left hand stayed in playing rigidly in the same tempo. But in Beethoven's time, it's changed after 1800 of Mozart. I mean, there's not a clear day where a newspaper published that from now on we have rubato. It developed, but it was more present in Beethoven's music, but not too much. So never, like for instance, Stokowski's Fifth, I think, he starts in double beat and then speeds up. Yeah, then Beethoven was wrong because he made the wrong decisions of the beginning notes. Okay. Then Jeremy asked, why didn't Beethoven write the original score in cut time? I think because, so alla breve, there's a difference between mesure à quatre temps vite, and I'm going to say that, explain, going deeper in that, that's another, it's also cut time, but that's different from alla breve. He probably used the small alla breve for having this heavy accent every two beats. If he would have used alla breve, that would be up, and now is it up, down, and down. Xander takes maybe too fast pills. Carol writes, I have listened to your argument about metronomes and double ticks of times and various examples. I'm not convinced. Okay. There are too many inconsistencies to generate a consistent answer. Yeah, but again, step back and put all the facts on a row, and I would say 90% of it points towards double beat. So I'm not saying there is nothing against single beat. Then he's talking on following your video on Schumann tempi. A pianist I know showed me a quote by Clara Schumann saying Robert's metronome markings are consistent and should be ignored for the most part. So yeah, guys, I'm always happy to find some questions in the comment boxes, but I mean, if you have to relate on a pianist, a friend who shows you one quote by Clara Schumann, okay, let's talk about Clara Schumann 2 seconds. She was considered to be a kind of modern pianist, and she was not, not everybody was happy with that because she had a classical training, but she left that behind. There are some, in the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung, there are some other things really interesting on Clara Schumann. I didn't know, just found them a few weeks ago, where she took that way of mechanical playing, of being faster. And so when she complains about metronome marks at Schumann, I don't know, just brainstorming here. She also reversed many of Schumann's later revisions of his works as to be too controversial. So she might just have taken another direction. Jones, Wim, the first movement sounds very credible at the speed, but I've taken my score Beethoven 5 to library, but I think recall finding that the final was ridiculously unbelievable slow. Yeah, so that I've mentioned, you have to try it and you have to accept it first 100% as if it were right, and then the world opens. Not to check, because if you check, you will not really go all to the end. That's my experience with the slow movements. It happens like that. Okay. What's the problem here? Anya says something. Okay. So Anya, if you just, she's not at home now, that's true, but if you just give the problem, like maybe can solve it after the live stream. Fidel writes, finally understand that inequality thing. That's great. Martin, the markings were really so fast. Wouldn't we expect a lot of complaints at the time? Yeah. So I think I've addressed that, but very short, you'll not find any complaints. That it's difficult, yes. Hammerklavier, Jenny writes that. Most don't, I think. They don't accept the 138. They want to have it slower, but they don't say that's taken as an argument against the double beat theory, but it hasn't anything to do with that. It could, but you cannot tell from that single quote. What it means is that it's really fast in quarter note 138. In my opinion, it is too fast. So I've made one video about the Martin Noortuin article, and I was forced to do that. I don't like to hammer someone on his head with counter arguments, certainly on that video, but I really was forced to do that. I was kind of, there he takes as an argument, well, those Czerny tempi, they are so fast for his etudes. There must have been complaints at the time. And then he comes up with the quote, which I found very suspicious at the time, because it came from Mr. Fink. That's the same who complained about the Mozart performance practice, that it was too fast. So he called upon Tomacek to give the metronome numbers for the Don Giovanni, which are surprisingly so fast that even today we don't play them. But that thing that he would say that Czerny was too fast, it would be very surprising. And I reconstructed that quote. So what Mr. Noortuin did actually, that made me a little bit angry, I admit. Just taking a part of a sentence here, part of a sentence there, part of a sentence there, and then he glued it together. And then you could have the impression with his explanation of those sentences that Fink indeed was saying that Czerny was unplayable. But in fact, Fink was saying the opposites. It's ridiculous to play it so many times. Play it so many times. He didn't say it was unplayable. So no, you won't find anything like that. Later you do. The Thalberg. I mean, Thalberg was famous for his third hand, and the Chopin etudes even. I mean, but then you are in a later period where things really become difficult, apart from metronome numbers. Hope that answers your question a little bit. Vidal says the single beat folks must explain why some metronome speeds are unplayable. Yeah, that's my point over and over again. Not that I want to be in discussion, but sometimes you are in a position where you have to stand up. You know what I mean? And I just say play me Czerny Opus 299 in that tempo. The reaction typically would be, well, those metronome numbers were not meant to be played in. But that's nonsense. You find over and over and over and over again that the metronome numbers were given an accurate speed indication, as accurate as possible. Czerny for sure, Modulus for sure, but also the instructions, many things. So that's nonsense. So yeah, where is the Opus 299? But that's the time we live in. It's the few against the many, and I think this needs to have some time. Music is emotion, and I can understand that if I play the Fifth of Beethoven, if you have left that piece in another performance, that I'll be put in the corner also of where I don't like the hip roll to be, like the finger pointing. Yeah, you were wrong. No, there is another truth, quote unquote. But I can understand that. It needs to settle down a little bit. Okay. Let's continue. We're almost at the end here of the comments. Wow, it's a really long live stream, but yeah, it's so important. I mean, and I don't know if the replay value of people who are not in the chat, or I don't know. We're just testing these things out. And again, if you have ideas to improve this, we'd be happy. To be short, it's not one of my qualities. So I'm looking forward to the Hammerklavier's 1 hour performance. We're going to make an episode on that. Don't tell anyone. I have a great quote to work around. Okay, there we have Julian. Wonderful video. I was extremely captivated by your performance. So much dramatic tension and detail is revealed. Yes, I must admit that. Completely convinced by your performance and wonderful musical scientific approach. Okay, now I make the impression I'm reading this to tap myself on the shoulder, but there must be something here. Hearing the harmony change so slowly was almost frightening. Oh yeah, that's this sentence. There was a great remark, because hearing the harmony change so slowly was almost frightening. That's true. A lot of people react like that. Just giving the harmonies time to settle here. Not only to just know they're there, but just feel them. Then change them. Play a little bit with timing. And the brain expects a normal progression, and Beethoven, that's why he's a genius. He just sets you on the wrong track. And if you as a performer and these tempi allow you to make use of that, yeah, then the experience is mind-blowing. And then all of that music, I think, becomes so incredibly new that the expression, the emotional expression, becomes so strong that in this Fifth Symphony, indeed, you get scared. The reason why I'm hammering on this so much is because once you experience that, on the other side, the emotions that you can have, that music has, the beauty, the joy, in Beethoven's case, also the humor. I was just practicing today the last movement of the Waldstein Sonata, in that double beat tempo. That's incredibly beautiful. Comes this rhythm and with the triples, and then great. It makes you happy. It's like the sun is shining here. Okay, Alexander. The single beat tempo knocking sounds fast to my ear, as if you're knocking in triplets. Yeah, we've talked about that. It's actually inevitable in triplets. You end up with feeling triplets. Ta-ta-ta-tum, ta-ta-ta-tum. Again, also the upbeat argument. I like it. I've made a note of that. It's yum pom 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 pom. So the first beat, the first bar actually acts in the fast tempo as an upbeat. I mean, it can never be the meaning of Beethoven. It can never be, by definition, I would say. Forget about metronome numbers. Beethoven would not have missed that. Ta-ta-ta-tum is indeed an upbeat. The first heavy beat comes ta-ta-ta-tum. But the rest, the 8th rest, is the heavy beat. Ta-ta-ta-tum. Yeah, the 16th chapel sung fast. Well, don't be surprised. It's something that in, I don't know if I should say this, but in the hip world, the younger generation is making the distinction from the previous one with speeding up. There's no research behind that. Really no. That's what I said of the Zander performance. If you would strip that symphony with the metronome numbers, so you would remove the metronome numbers, there would be no explanation for that tempo. No, none. And that's with many Baroque orchestras today also. They just rush and rush. And they feel as if going back to the old tempi, where tempo ordinario is just 60 for the quaver, for the quarter note. That's giving into romanticism. They forget about tradition. It's not the 19th century did not change everything. We've made a video on Bach. But start from that. Common time, 4/4, tempo ordinario. The next Bach World Tempo Clavier will have that prelude, F sharp minor, first book. That's on the edge of a normal common time. It's around 60. I'll play it in 50 for the quarter note. Chinese tempo, 100 for the quarter note. I mean, it's simple as that. And that's being documented. It's not denied by, I mean, even going to the real opposite, like Klaus Mieling. I mean, it's no discussion. 60 for the quarter note is the tempo ordinario. And if you start from that, it becomes a whole different story. Yeah, here's Starlight. He made the comment on the upbeats. Great, great. Evocatus, we know that back in the late 18th, 19th century, orchestras had only one common rehearsal before performing a new piece. It was a disaster, and despite composers making a lot of compromises in orchestral music difficulty, it led to a lot of mistakes anyway. Beethoven himself struggled a lot from it. He had to lower the speed of some parts dramatically, even to another tempo mark. I wonder, are Beethoven's tempo marks in the first editions a compromise or an expression of pure musical idea? Well, he did make some changes, and actually we are informed by that by, again, Anton Schindler. So we take from Anton Schindler what we like. But no, that's true. And the reason why he did that was, as Schindler explained it, that at the end of his life, this increase of tempo was happening. And he was not happy with that. So he changed tempo markings, Italian tempo words, to suppress this race of tempo, which is the only meaning. Does it influence a lot? Well, when he would go from allegretto to andante, yes. It's an interesting thing, and we have to, yeah, again, put all information together. We will start a project, a website collecting all of the information. It needs to be a database for where you can interactively search. I have also the manuscripts, all the editions, all the different metronome numbers, and so on. But that proves to me that this increase in tempo was happening at the end of Beethoven's life, and he was not happy with that. So if people say sometimes, well, a composer is always happy with a nice performance, I wouldn't bet Beethoven would be. So I don't think so. Okay, Klaviermusik Allegro con brio. Are you kidding me? Yeah, we've talked about that. I mean, I actually also don't understand why people comment like this. As if I am an idiot. Okay, maybe I am. But I've addressed that point. It's Allegro con brio compared to what? To what you think is an Allegro con brio, or what Beethoven might have thought is an Allegro con brio. So, okay. Well, this was 1.5 hours of talking. Let me just go to the chat. Where can I find musical metronome marks for composers like C.P. Bach? No, C.P. Bach he didn't have a metronome. It was invented much later. Grieg, Burkmüller, Massenet. Burkmüller, I don't know if Burkmüller has metronome numbers. So at the end, later 19th century, the interest for metronome numbers disappeared. Blake Simpson, listening to the inner voices and you'll slow down. Well, in the Hammerklavier, it's obvious. It's incredible what polyphonic, how polyphonic this piece becomes. A really good example of taking timing into account is Lang Lang's performance of Chopin. Yeah. Well, playing on a modern Steinway Fidel will not happen soon. I will be working on a lecture on all of this. That will go together with my pianoforte, and we will actually hope to make some real tours. Can you imagine that? Me in the United States, touring the United States, and if there is no pianoforte and a Steinway is there, then I will be happy to use that. So the tempo a musician plays in is, I think, more important than the instrument. The instrument helps a lot. What is the meaning of playing on a pianoforte if you imagine that we were right here playing it in single beat, or trying to do? Pop, 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 pop. The second movement of the Waldstein Sonata, William says, is actually so fast that many virtuosos pianists have to play a simplified one. Yeah. So the last movement goes, Czerny writes, sehr ruhig, very calm. And then the C major chord stays so long, and then suddenly you shift to just the fifth is great. And then after 2 pages of just wandering, walking kind of in nature, enjoying everything, with great moments. Oh, you need to be so precise then it's just shock. And it is a shock every time. You can listen to that a zillion times. It's our responsibility as a musician to make the audience feel it every time. It's to do with timing. Physicist here, okay, great, we need you. Talking about pendulums. Of course you're not an idiot. Okay, so guys, yeah, Guido says, Jenny says glissando too, right? Now actually it describes to have every note heard clearly, but that's the level of discussion sometimes. Yeah, people are afraid to change, and I understand that, and it's not necessary to change, not for a bit. But yeah, if you want to reconstruct that initial idea of the composer, it's more complicated than taking out some quotes. Okay guys, don't forget that Pachelbel. Anya is still here. I will copy. Yeah, I'm not pushing you, but if you would consider to buy it, here are 2 links. Actually doesn't work. Let me try to share that again. The Pachelbel, it's a great recording. I'll show it again for those of you who've missed the beginning of the live stream. It is just disappearing. Oh, it's on top chat. Okay. Oh, there it is. And there you have the code live, something like that. I will keep it open for an hour or so, or tonight. And it's a beautiful disc. Let me show it again. We're so proud of that. The CD is coming as well. It's almost finished. So, yes, our first production. Who knows? In 5 years, Beethoven symphonies here. And I'm not ending without thanking my Patreons. Just making that call. There are an incredible support now. 63 or some. We have monthly hangouts, so we just have video calls with each other where we can talk more directly to your questions, even from $1 a month. But imagine, the Beethoven Symphony has almost 6,000 views. If 30% would give $1 a month, we could do this full time. Okay guys, that was it for today. I hope you liked that. Stay tuned for more. Next week we'll have Swelling, and then we will bring you the video where I sign these discs. So it will be a little bit of a community time, not diving into tempo things. Then next week after we'll have Chopin F minor etude that I actually recorded. I've practiced a little bit. No, joking. Some people I'm not going to detail that there. Make a video on Chopin, and so we continue. So stay tuned, give your questions if you have suggestions for other things. I'm always open for that, also for these live streams. I'll see how this continues. 1.5 hours might be a little bit too long, but anyway, a lot to talk about. Thanks for watching again, and see you soon again. Bye.